another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Robin Mines. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchi, and thanks a lot for joining us. Elections are fast approaching. There's a lot that's going on in the country with regards to security or the lack of it. We've had some sort of hopeful report about a few more people who were kidnapped from the Kaduna train incident being released, hoping that a lot more would be going through that phase as well. But insecurity continues to be at the top of a lot of people's minds, and people are wondering if things are going to get even more intense or hopefully better when campaigns actually begin properly and there's a lot of activity around the country. There's a lot of worry about, government being distracted by the elections and campaigning and what that will mean for the average Nigerian. But we're going to be talking about, imagining a better Nigeria in our conversation today, and I'm joined now from virtually by the Senior Special Assistant on Research to the President, Somkele Awakalu. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Ebuka. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. I want to start with, I know you work in research, but that means you also have a lot of these numbers, hopefully, and data at your disposal, and just the state of the nation with regards to security and where we are. I think now more than ever we've realized that it's almost impossible to build a successful or progressive country without it being secure and safe. A lot of people believe that Nigeria is at its worst in decades with regards to security. Where is the head of the presidency at today, and what should Nigerians be hearing that should be keeping us going, if anything?
Okay, thank you, Ebuka. Because I'm not a security expert, but I'll come from an economic perspective. I think that fundamentally that the Nigerian citizenry and perhaps some people in the diaspora do not understand that even policymakers are human. So every conversation around security challenges, security risks, and every bad information that comes in is also affecting the policymakers. And on a daily basis, there are conversations amongst policymakers and advisors about how to ensure that everybody. I think that in terms of comparison, it will always be a subjective perspective. There's no way of getting an objective perspective in terms of, is this the worst? Has it been the worst? Don't forget that the country also fought a civil war. So in saying that this is the worst is perhaps not considering a lot of other indicators. However, that is not an alibi to say that things are in a good place. But I also want to point out something that I'm also going to have further down the line in the conversation is that essentially there's no trust. There's a lack of trust and a trust deficit between the government and the citizenry, which is one of the recommendations of Imagine Nigeria report, where there's a huge trust deficit or trust gap between the Nigerian citizenry and its government. I'm not here to apportion blame as to who's responsible for that trust deficit. However, there is a trust deficit such that when there is good information or news that should lift up the citizenry, we still bash that news. There's conversations around alleged arrest of alleged suspects that planned the Owo attack or that were part of the Owo attack or that housed the people that planned the Owo attack. And a lot of the conversations I've seen are around the names of people and were they in Kuje prison at this time? Is this really a true news? So that is also some of the problem that we have to contend with. I think in every interaction, you have to be able to look at yourself and then look at the other person and be able to find out where there are faults. So this is not an alibi. I think some policymakers and some politicians get sidelined with that blame game, but I think that there are efforts that are being made to secure lives and property. And I think where there is good news, we should definitely chime in and praise our security forces.
So I hear you completely, but you talked about trust and the trust deficit there, and that's definitely a huge factor with regards to how Nigeria is situated today. It's almost impossible for you to find a Nigerian who believes these days that there's sort of a proper connection between the Nigerians and Mr. President. And I think that's also one of the biggest issues. I hear you talk about, your work in research, you're talking about the effects of insecurity on the economy and all of that. There's a constant belief by Nigerians that Mr. President doesn't seem to know a lot of these things or doesn't seem to see what Nigerians are seeing or feel the same thing. Is it a case of people around him not letting him know or not doing their jobs? Or does he know and not seem to be as effective as he should be? Because whether we like it or not, 3 of his biggest promises as president when he was going to come in 2015 were security and the economy. And these are 2 things that have been the hardest hit in this government. It's hard for anybody to understand how his cardinal points have been, for want of a better word, completely ineffective.
Okay, so I'm not going to be boxed into those 2 perhaps mindsets. I'm going to try and answer the question as best as I can. I think that it's important to understand that Nigeria is at an inflection point. At no other point in time have there been challenges within Nigeria's border in more than 2 geopolitical zones. We can see what's happening in the southeast. We see what's happening in the northeast and the northwest. There are also issues with the south-south. There's only a finite number of personnel within the military parameters. But there's a lot of work that's being done in terms of developing our strength in personnel, developing our strength in equipment. And so, yes, so if you consider it as a fact, I know that people like to say, don't blame this person or don't blame that person. But as an economist, what we are taught to do is that when you're doing analysis, there has to be comparison. It's either a time series comparison or a cross-sectional comparison. So you can't just look at something in its own sense. In terms of the economy, of course, we know that there are contributions that crime and insecurity has on productivity, on safety. For instance, in the Southeast, for a long time now, I can't really put my finger on how long it's been, Monday is an unproductive day. That is a lot of money that is lost for persons. That's a lot of money lost in tax. So all of us, and that is not a federal government instituted sit at home, for instance. So I think that, again, are there areas of improvement? Of course, there are areas of improvement, but we need to also look at the areas where there have been some improvements. And for instance, if you look at some states in Nigeria, they were completely inhabitable, but there's been work that's done there. But the problem is that there are pockets of people who are thriving with the crime situation. They are hiding under certain banners. Oh, if this is happening, some people are just normal criminals, normal armed robbers, normal, I'm not saying normal, I'm saying that they are kidnappers, but they're hiding under the banner of banditry, or they're hiding under the banner of IPOB. So I think that we just need to be a little bit more sensitive. As a research person and as somebody who is an economist, I have to be careful to make complete assertions. I have to make sure that the data tallies with it and not to be too emotive.
So, I mean, it's hard for me not to ask you security questions, so I'm going to try and leave that. But, I mean, you mentioned the sit at home in the Southeast, and yes, I hear you. While it's not the federal government who instituted that, security is under the purview of the federal government, and you wonder how this has festered for so long, and the security agencies seem almost handicapped and can't sort of, be the arbiter here. Why do whatever you call them, bandits, terrorists, or whatever, seem to have the upper hand, and this is at home still persists when the federal government security forces can't counter that effect? But let's leave that. Let's go into the economy, which, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of talk about blaming, COVID and all of that. But Nigeria is not the only country that was hit by COVID. But we see what the inflation numbers are here. We also see what's happening with the Naira. Unemployment is unreal. You don't even need to see figures. You just drive around cities and you see how many people just seem to be standing on the streets doing nothing. It's literally in our faces. What you, as a research person, as an economist who works with Mr. President, what is the plan? Yes, we have less than a year to go, but what is the federal government thinking in this regard? Because we literally are sitting on a time bomb that will explode if nothing is done.
I think that the plan has always been the same plan. I don't think there are two critical issues over the last 8 years that have kind of put spanner in the works. COVID is a big one, as well as the oil crisis in 2016, 2017, which also led us into recession in both periods. But if you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, yes, it's something that has affected people differently. That has affected everybody in terms of the economic shock and the health risks and whatnot. But you have to look at structural vulnerabilities. There are certain countries that are not built the same way we are. They don't have the same institutions we have. So definitely you can't expect for everybody to be on an even keel when crisis occurs. I'll give you an example. If you look at the Bank of England and the Fed Reserve, they have a different way of looking at inflation. Their own inflation levels are different, such that in the UK, the Bank of England is targeting inflation of 2%. If you include inflation expectation, it's probably going to be about 2.2%. As at the last time I checked, inflation in the UK is 9.4%. Whereas in Nigeria, the central bank, I believe, not speaking for them, but I believe they'll be comfortable with 11%. But when it comes to inflation, inflation sometimes directly affects economic growth. So if you adopt a monetary stance to combat inflation, that comes at the expense of economic growth. So when the numbers come out and you see that the country is growing at 0.5%, you're also going to complain about that. This is not to say that 18.6% inflation is good or it's something that should happen. However, a lot of that inflation is imported. Energy prices are up, food prices are up. Food prices are up across the globe because there are issues going on in Ukraine and Russia. They have a substantial effect on grain prices. They also have an effect on fertilizer because some of the components of that fertilizer are mainly grown in those regions. There are a lot of countries that are collapsing now under the weight of the fiscal crisis that COVID-19 have brought on them, not to mention Sri Lanka. We have seen what has happened with Sri Lanka. So I think that there's a lot of effort that is going on in terms of trying to stem the tide of inflation, in terms of trying to reduce unemployment. Under the Economic Sustainability Plan, there were a number of direct initiatives that were targeting reducing unemployment because, yes, unemployment is high, but it could be higher. If you look at the amount of layoffs that could have been, the government instituted a program where they would pay certain small business owners salary for their staff for 3 months, which covers the 3 months where there was a lockdown. If that intervention had not occurred, there would have been a lot more layoffs. So a lot of work is going on behind the scenes in terms of empowering people, empowering entrepreneurs, empowering business owners to ensure that we definitely get the unemployment numbers down. But again, I'll reiterate that it doesn't mean that the efforts are totally sufficient, but work will continue to go on to identify the most vulnerable people, to identify people who are suffering, whether it's a ease of doing business issue, whether it's a tax issue. All these are being considered by policymakers, and I believe that we will see an uptick, a positive uptick in some of these numbers that are being thrown around.
Well, I hear a lot of behind the scenes, but everybody who's a Nigerian is in front of the scene and nothing seems to be felt, unfortunately, which is why everybody's complaining. And I don't know how long these things are supposed to last for. But the presidency of President Muhammadu Buhari has about 9 months left to go. In your words, as quickly as you can, a sentence or two if you can, is it possible to still imagine a better Nigeria under President Buhari in 9 months?
I think it's possible to. Okay, you said 2 sentences.
As quickly as you can.
Okay, it is possible because I know that there's a number of things that are going to crystallize within the next 9 to 10 months. Because sometimes there's a lag when you invest in something, unless you are looking for MMM or crypto that gives you you invest 5 naira today and tomorrow you get 1 million. Once you invest, there's always a lag time. And there are some things that have been done 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that are going to start crystallizing now. When you look at certain things in terms of, I know that this is not the question you asked me, but there are some, in some quarters about the debt service and whatnot, that's capturing a particular period in time. But now you can see that corporate taxes are going to come in, NLNG dividends have come in June. So when those numbers come out again, it's going to be marginally, it's going to be quite lower than the numbers that we saw for Q1.
All right.
In the next 9 months, I believe that there will be some positives. Whether it's going to be game-changing, I do not know that, but there will be some positives that we'll see right up to May 2023.
Well, thank you very much. We waited 7 years for these lags to crystallize. I don't know that many of them have. I don't know how much faith Nigerians can have in the next 9 months, but thanks for joining us, all right? All right, we'll take a break now and we'll be right back. Please stay with us.